When you fall silent, something profound happens inside the narcissistic psyche. Control, which once felt absolute to her, begins to slip, not because you confronted her, not because you argued, but because you stopped responding. A narcissistic woman relies on emotional feedback the way a fire relies on oxygen. Praise, anger, explanation, even resistance, all of it reassures her that she still occupies the center of your inner world. Silence removes that reassurance. From a psychological perspective, this is where the illusion fractures. As Carl Jung observed, the ego depends on reflection. It must see itself mirrored in others to remain stable. When you withdraw that mirror, the ego does not calmly adapt. It destabilizes. What she feels first is not sadness, and certainly not love. It is anxiety, a subtle but growing sense of unease. Why am I no longer being reacted to? Why isn't my presence provoking anything? Your silence interrupts her narrative. In her internal story, she is the one who provokes emotion, sets the tone, pulls the strings. When you go quiet, that story no longer makes sense. The mind searches for explanations, and when none arrive, it fills the gap with doubt. Doubt is dangerous to the narcissistic structure because it threatens the fantasy of superiority and control. Importantly, silence is not passive. It is an active psychological stance. You are no longer participating in a dynamic where she defines the emotional temperature. You are reclaiming authorship over your inner life, and she can feel that shift even if she cannot name it. The calm absence of reaction communicates something words never could. You no longer have access to me. This is why silence feels so loud to her. It strips away the power she believed was secure. It exposes how dependent that power was on your engagement. And in that exposure, her armor, carefully constructed from dominance, charm, and manipulation, begins to crack. Remember this. You do not break the armor by attacking it. You break it by refusing to hold it up. Silence is not weakness. It is clarity. And clarity, once claimed, changes everything. When you step back and remove yourself from her emotional orbit, something unavoidable takes place. Your absence becomes a mirror she never wanted to look into. As long as you were present, responding, explaining, defending, or even reacting, your energy gave her a place to project her unresolved inner world. You carried emotions she did not want to face in herself. The moment you leave that space empty, the projections have nowhere to land. From a Jungian lens, this is the confrontation with the shadow. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow as everything the ego refuses to acknowledge: fear, insecurity, inadequacy, dependency. A narcissistic woman spends her life running from this inner material, constructing an image strong enough to keep it buried. Your presence helped maintain that structure. Your absence dismantles it. Without you, there is no external stabilizer. No one to reassure her importance. No one to absorb her emotional chaos. And in that quiet, she is left with herself. This is deeply uncomfortable. It produces restlessness, irritation, and an unspoken sense of emptiness. She may not consciously recognize what is happening, but she feels it in her body, in the tension, the need for distraction, the sudden urge to seek attention elsewhere. This is why your absence affects her more than any argument ever could. Conflict still keeps you psychologically engaged. Silence removes the relationship as a stage entirely. And when the stage disappears, the performance collapses. She must sit with questions she has avoided for years. Am I enough without admiration? Who am I when no one is watching? Why does this emptiness keep returning? Understand this clearly. This discomfort is not cruelty on your part. It is consequence. You are no longer managing emotions that were never yours to manage. You are no longer compensating for wounds you did not create. And in stepping away, you unintentionally force a reckoning she has postponed her entire life. What happens next is out of your control, and it should be. Some people grow when faced with themselves. Others double down on avoidance. Your responsibility ends the moment you choose self-respect over emotional entanglement. Take this with you. When you remove yourself, you do not create her emptiness. You simply stop filling it. And that single act is where your freedom begins. After silence and absence do their work, another layer is exposed, one that strikes at the very core of the narcissistic psyche. What truly unsettles her is not that you left, but that you no longer notice. For a narcissistic woman, attention is not a luxury. It is psychological oxygen. To be seen, reacted to, referenced, even negatively, is to exist. And when that stream of attention stops, a deeper fear surfaces. Irrelevance. From a Jungian perspective, identity built on external validation is inherently fragile. Carl Jung warned that when the ego is inflated without a solid inner foundation, it becomes dependent on constant reinforcement. The narcissistic self is precisely this, an image propped up by admiration, desire, and emotional response. Your silence removes one more pillar holding that image in place. This is why being ignored feels more painful than being challenged. Rejection still acknowledges importance. Anger still confirms impact. Silence, however, suggests something far more threatening. You no longer matter enough to provoke a response. That implication cuts deeper than any insult. It suggests that her influence over your inner world has ended. Inside her, this registers as a quiet but persistent alarm. She may rationalize it as pride or dismissal, but beneath the surface, there is a gnawing discomfort. Questions begin to circulate. If he's not thinking about me, where did my power go? If I don't affect him, who am I to him now? These questions destabilize the carefully managed sense of superiority she relies on. And notice something important here. This has nothing to do with revenge. You are not trying to prove a point. The effect occurs precisely because you are no longer trying at all. Your disengagement communicates that your sense of self is no longer organized around her presence. That realization reframes the entire dynamic. You move from being a participant to being a reference point she can no longer access. This is where silence becomes transformative for you. You stop measuring your worth by her reaction. You stop performing for recognition. And in doing so, you quietly step into psychological independence. Remember this, being ignored is devastating only to those who need to be seen to exist. When you no longer seek validation, you reclaim something far more powerful, your autonomy. And that is a loss she feels, even when she never admits it. As your silence continues, it begins to communicate something even more unsettling to her: emotional superiority, not dominance through aggression, not control through aggression, not control through manipulation, but something far more disarming: inner stability. A narcissistic woman is highly attuned to emotional hierarchies. She constantly assesses who reacts more, who needs more, who is affected. When she senses that you are no longer emotionally moved by her behavior, a cue, yet conclusion forms in her mind. You are no longer beneath her psychologically. From a Jungian standpoint, This is deeply threatening. Carl Jung emphasized that true power comes from individuation, the ability to stand firmly in one's own center, rather than seeking completion through others. Your silence signals exactly that. You are no longer trying to win, explain, or be understood. You are simply grounded. And to someone who survives on emotional leverage, groundedness feels like distance she cannot cross. She interprets your calm as detachment, and detachment as elevation. You are no longer pulled into emotional storms. You are no longer pulled into emotional storms. You no longer rush to defend your character or clarify your intentions. This creates an unspoken imbalance. In the past, she may have felt larger because you were reacting. Now, she feels smaller because you are not, and this reversal quietly terrifies her. What makes this especially powerful is that you are not performing strength. You are embodying it. There is no announcement, no declaration, no dramatic exit, just consistency, just restraint, just the absence of emotional volatility. To her nervous system, this reads as control she cannot access. She may test boundaries, provoke, or attempt to reinsert herself emotionally, but the calm remains. And with each failed attempt, the message becomes clearer. You are no longer available for psychological games. This is where her usual strategies lose effectiveness. Manipulation requires emotional hooks. Charm requires desire. Conflict requires engagement. Your silence removes the stage on which all of this operates, and in its place stands something immovable, self-possession. Understand this clearly. Emotional superiority is not about being better than someone else. It is about being anchored within yourself. When you reach that place, others can sense it immediately. They may not admire it, they respect it. And those who relied on your emotional availability will feel its absence most sharply. Take this with you. The moment you stop reacting, you stop being controllable. And when you are no longer controllable, you become free. Once control is lost and emotional superiority is sensed, a subtle transformation takes place inside her inner world. What was once confidence turns into uncertainty, and uncertainty slowly mutates into obsession. This is not the dramatic obsession of romance, but the quiet, intrusive kind, the kind that occupies the mind when certainty disappears, when she can no longer predict you, influence you, or provoke you. Her attention turns inward and begins to circle around a single, unresolved question. Why didn't this work? From a psychological standpoint, why didn't this work? The narcissistic personality depends on patterns. She learns what draws reactions, what creates attachment, what restores control. Your silence disrupts those patterns. According to Carl Jung, the psyche becomes fixated when a complex is activated, but cannot be resolved. Your withdrawal creates exactly that condition. The emotional loop remains open, but there is no conclusion, and the mind does not tolerate unfinished narratives easily. This is when control quietly gives way to fixation. She may replay conversations, analyze moments, reinterpret your behavior, and question her own strategies, not out of self-awareness, but out of a need to restore equilibrium. The loss of influence destabilizes her sense of order. You have become a variable she cannot account for, and that makes you psychologically significant again. Ironically, because you are no longer trying to be. What matters here is that this shift happens without your participation. You are not chasing, correcting, or proving anything. You are absent, and that absence becomes the loudest presence in her mind. The P. or the dynamic reverses. You move on with your life while she remains mentally entangled, searching for a leverage point that no longer exists. This is also where many people make a critical mistake. They re engage, curious about the reaction. And in doing so, they close the loop that should have remained open. Silence only works when it is complete. When you return, even briefly, obsession dissolves back into familiarity. The deeper lesson is not about what she feels, but about what you reclaim. You stop living inside someone else's psychological frame. You stop being an unresolved chapter in their story and begin writing your own. Remember this: obsession is born where control ends. And the moment you stop trying to be understood, you become unforgettable, not by effort, but by absence. At this final stage, it becomes important to understand what silence truly is and what it is not. Silence is not a tactic designed to punish her, nor is it a strategy meant to extract regret, remorse, or return. The moment it becomes that, it loses its power. Silence, in its most mature form, is an act of liberation. It is the quiet decision to step out of a psychological contract that was draining you of presence, clarity, and selfhood. From a deeper psychological view, this is the moment individuation begins. Carl Jung described individuation as the process of becoming who you actually are, rather than who you were conditioned to be through relationships, expectations, or projections. When you choose silence, you are no longer defining yourself in opposition to her behavior. You are no longer reacting, correcting, or resisting. You are simply returning to yourself. What she feels at this point is not anger in the conventional sense, it is loss. Specifically, the loss of access. She no longer has entry into your emotional world. Your thoughts are no longer shaped around her mood. Deep inside, your energy is no longer available for interpretation or manipulation, and that absence is permanent in a way. Arguments never are. Conflict implies connection. Silence implies closure. This is why true silence often produces an unexpected internal shift for you. The nervous system calms. The constant mental rehearsal stops. You regain time, focus, and emotional space. You begin to notice how much of your life was organized around managing someone else's reactions. And in that realization, something fundamental changes. You no longer want to return. This is the part most people misunderstand. The goal was never to make her feel something specific. What she feels is secondary. What matters is that you no longer abandon yourself to be understood, validated, or chosen. You stop negotiating your worth, and that is the real conclusion of this journey. Silence is not an ending. It is a reclaiming. When you withdraw your energy, you don't create distance out of fear. You create it out of self-respect. And once self-respect becomes your foundation, you never need to explain your absence again. Carry this with you. The most powerful response is not reaction, not explanation, not closure, but the quiet decision to choose yourself and never look back.